All right, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining. I am Wade Callis, and I'm going to be your Master of Ceremony today. So I wanted to welcome you first to our webinar. This is an exciting webinar for us to be able to put together with our friends and partners at UsableNet and the Veteran Affairs. So today we're going to be talking about how to create 508 compliant digital experiences. And I think that when we talk about building them quickly and painlessly, I think it's really, as we all know, degrees of quickness and pain, right, that we all go through in trying to develop these applications. And so today we brought together some experts in the field who can hopefully share with us and share with you some best practices and some things that they do to be able to build applications that are available for everyone, all of our employees, all of the citizens, and all of the people that we serve. So I'm with Squid. I'm responsible for our federal business and our enterprise business. And so with that, let me go ahead and kick it off and introduce you to our panelists. So today we've got three panelists of just amazing pedigree and experience from these three panelists. So Jason Taylor is going to start us off today. He's the Chief Innovation Strategist at UsableNet and a co-founder, and he'll be talking to us about sort of this accessibility imperative that exists not only within the public sector, but also in the private sector, and why it's so important for all of us. And then we'll get to hear from someone that I've just been really blessed to be able to get to know, and this is Pat Sheehan. Pat is the VA's Section 508 Office Chief, and Pat brings a ton of experience. And really, if you know anything about the federal government, the VA is the vanguard. Everyone looks to the VA and the work that they've done. And under Pat's leadership, I think you're going to be able to learn a lot from today. And then on his team is Lindsay Delisle. Lindsay is the one who makes it happen every day. And we've worked closely with Lindsay, and she's just going to bring us some really valuable best practices on how you can use the things that they've learned over the years in your application building. And then what we'll do is we'll wrap up at the end and take questions from you. So as you've got questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. Make sure you can put them in. If you want to put them in just with panelists, you can do that. You can also drop down and say panelists and all attendees, and that can be a dialogue that we have going during the call here. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Jason. And so Jason, as I said, is from UsableNet. He'll go a little bit into his background, but as one of the co-founders of UsableNet, brings a lot of experience from the software testing side as well. And so without further ado, let me turn it over to Jason. Jason, take it away.
Thank you, Wade. So I wanted to start just by giving everyone a little background at UsableNet and myself, just to give you a sense of in terms of credibility around, and also from a level of experience. So UsableNet help a whole range of companies. Essentially, we provide technology and services to companies to make sure that they're building fully accessible digital experiences, whether that's websites, mobile apps, for example. We've been around 20 years. Myself and my partners, we started around actually Section 508 back into 2000, essentially building ways to help companies apply those sort of guidelines into their development process. So in the early days, we actually launched some of the first plugins for authoring tools such as Dreamweaver and FrontPage, for those that remember those early authoring tools, essentially providing us an elegant way for dev teams to apply or look at Section 508 from a compliance perspective or guideline perspective inside of their code. We've done a lot of work with different types of disability communities. We're very honored to work with a wide range of community-led and activists inside the disability community. Some notable ones, we work very closely with the American Federation for the Blind, Access Works, which is based out of Austin, which is part of Nobility. And we also work very closely with Helen Keller Services. And actually, we're going to be very honored in receiving one of the first accessibility awards from Helen Keller Services tomorrow in their inaugural award ceremony that they're going to hold. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of background about UsableNet and myself. But I wanted to sort of approach the subject, which Wade talks about the importance of accessibility and how to talk about accessibility. The first thing that we try to do when we work with companies and organizations is to get people to understand this is about people. It's not about a range of technical standards. It's about the ultimate goal, which is to make sure that people can benefit from the power of digital experiences. So I pulled out a quote here from the UN talking about the fact the internet is a human right. It's very important to us and to the people that we work with to really emphasize that this is about empowerment. This is about empowerment of citizens and employees to partake in the global change of everything towards digital. And I think everybody can probably appreciate how the pandemic has amplified that importance, how the fact that now pretty much every service that people think about, they think about providing digitally first. And if you don't make your digital experience accessible, then of course you're going to leave people out. And that is a very important message to deliver to teams, which is what you're trying to do is empower and make sure that every citizen and employee can benefit from the power that they're generating in those digital experiences. And if you set it in that framework, then you start talking about what are the practical things to do. The next thing that we typically need to do is help what I class as accessibility advocates increase the importance of inside an organization. So if I look at how can you increase the importance of organization, and maybe Wade, you could just pull on to the next slide. I picked out sort of three themes that we try to talk about when we talk about the importance of accessibility within inside an organization and help our advocates for accessibility get high level buy-in. I think the first very important aspect of accessibility is an accessible product is an easier to use experience for everybody. It's not by accident that the most popular websites and apps out there like Amazon and Apple are also the most accessible apps and websites out there. So it's important that this work of Section 508 or making things accessible is not seen as something that is going to benefit just a handful, but it's going to benefit every user. So following the guidelines is going to create a better digital experience for everybody. The second one, I think, in the definitely in the federal and state level, is to emphasize the disability community represents a large proportion of those citizens and employees than it does in the commercial space. So it's important for organizations such as federal and state to take this more seriously than even the commercial space. And thirdly, we remind people it's the law. But once you've got people buying into the empathy of making sure that they're providing digital experiences for everybody, the law is sort of a way to make sure that you're following the guidelines. So yes, it's the law. It's federal Section 508 in the federal place. States are becoming far more active in this place. California Unruh Civil Rights Act is driving a lot of lawsuits today across a wide range of apps and websites for people making sure that they're accessible to people with disabilities. And this year alone, there'll be probably 4,000 private lawsuits against all types of companies in the commercial space, driving home the importance of accessibility in that space. And that's, from a practical point of view, that's one lawsuit every hour that's being filed today in the United States. So once you've got the sort of buy-in, what should your accessibility sort of program cover? And if we can go to the last slide for me, Wade. I think it's important to think about, again, what is the most important aspect of your digital experience. So we talk about making sure you focus on user stories, success stories, meaning what is the app or the website able to provide to people to do. So think about user tasks and making sure that you're making those user tasks as accessible as possible. Importantly, I think that like the first touch should be a priority for a lot of companies. Like what are the ways that they're reaching out to the community or employees, making sure that first touch, whether it's social or outreach or email, they're thinking about the accessibility of that first touch, because the first touch obviously leads to the second touch. And if the first touch is inaccessible, the second touch never comes. I think the other thing is that, you should recognize today the types of experiences that people are building to deliver digital sort of use cases are becoming more complex. They're not just static websites with images and forms. They're interactive. They're login. They're complicated. What I would describe in the olden days, web applications, not websites or web content sites. So, and actually those web applications and those apps or native apps that people are building are probably the ones which deliver the most amount of value. So again, being prepared to look at and make sure that your most complicated web applications are accessible, because they will empower the most in terms of making those accessible. You've got to look at employee systems. Every employee for the last 18 months has basically had to work remotely from home. If they are not accessible, you shut out people from being able to partake in employment, which is the number one area for society. And then lastly, make sure you're looking at things like video and education material that you're generating. It's easy to make that stuff accessible, but it's also easy to make it unaccessible. So make sure that that's on the list of things that you're attacking. And I'm really looking forward to listening to VA today, because they've actually, taken one really complicated application world, and that's going to be very important to hear about today.
Beautiful. Jason, thank you so much. Really appreciate that. So with that, let's go ahead and flip over to Pat. So as I said earlier, Pat Sheehan is the chief of the Section 508 office for the VA. He's had a career that spanned 31 years at the VA. In 1989, he joined as a computer specialist and worked within their IT test facility as an adaptive trainer until 2001. In 2001, he moved over to Section 508 and now leads that organization and that group. And like I said, to open, Pat and Lindsay and this team, and an amazing team that they've built there, is really the vanguard in the industry. And Pat has offered, for any of you that want to be able to reach out after this to be able to talk and to gain insight, he's offered to do that. So with that, let me turn it over to Pat Sheehan for him to be able to talk about how leadership really matters and how you can lead and drive accessibility and usability in your organization. So with that, Pat, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. It's absolutely great to be here. And I wouldn't be here, first off, if I didn't have the best team in the federal government. They are just absolutely a crackerjack team. We are very successful because of the hard work that they do. I started out, I've been in the federal government for a long time. Took over the 508 program back in about 2002, 2003, and wanted to build a team. My team first started off at 5 people, and we were working mostly on websites. And as we grew, we realized that we needed to put a focus on what our mission was going to be as far as 508 is concerned. And that's one of the things that we find is critical in helping to build teams. You've got to have focus. You have to know what your main mission is going to be. In the early days, it was websites. We didn't have web-based applications, but then we got into that. And as time moved on and we did more work, we were able to build a better focus on what the needs of the environment were. We interacted with leadership. We indicated to leadership that there were lots of 508 issues. What we learned over time is that you had to take and not only define what your focus was going to be, but put your process down in writing and be able to follow that process. It helped us to grow from where we are now, where we started to where we are now, with 25 federal employees, 35 contractors, and doing quite a bit of work in lots of areas. So we started off with indicating what we wanted to do, talked about our process, wrote it down, and then we started collecting data. And that data we turned into metrics. And with those metrics, we were able to tell leadership why we needed to have more people, why our budget needed to get bigger, that sort of thing, stuff that would allow us to do more work. And what we learned is that you have to be able to speak to leadership in terms that they are interested in. And in this case, it's risk, whether it's risk because of 508 lawsuits, as Jason said, risks because you've got people that can't do their jobs, You've got to be able to get all that information in to process it and communicate it to the folks upstairs so that they understand that when you've got 53,000, let's say, disabled people, as the VA does, or you've got veterans service organizations or veterans groups that are visually impaired, Paralyzed Veterans of America, Disabled American Veterans, you've got to be able to service those groups. So you need to be able to understand what their issues are. And all of that gets communicated back to those groups, through those groups, into our organization, and then gets, we speak to our upper management about that. And that's where we start to see the results in moving progress forward, being able to get the people in place, being able to get the tools in place, as Lindsay will walk you through, being able to start looking at websites, web-based applications, moving the testing and the auditing, automating it, moving it to the front so that you can start looking at things like a code before it gets executed, bringing people with disabilities in to be able to do testing with the tools that we use. And in my case, being able to communicate to companies that are out there that say, I can't use your product because it wasn't designed with accessibility in mind or usability in mind. And this is what I mean by that. I can't access your product because you're asking me to do it with a mouse, and that's just not going to work for me. So being able to communicate that to companies, but not only that, provide them the ability to work together with them to help provide them solutions. Within my organization and the group of people that I have, we do a great job of not only looking at products, but being able to communicate back to developers as to how they can move forward in testing and what their products need to be able to do to work properly with access technology. So we don't work as the 508 police within the Department of Veterans Affairs. We work as partners with companies to move forward so that we can get a more accessible product. Everything isn't always 100% accessible. So what we try to show, particularly show to leadership and the veterans groups, is that we are putting resources into what we're doing. We're fixing issues as they come up. We're fixing issues over time, and then we've got the right tools in place to be able to do that. We have the necessary training that we need so that we can educate our own people and developers. And then we have folks like Lindsay support people who are in there on the front lines, in the trenches, and that tools, training, and support mantra really helps us to move forward as far as building products together. It's kind of interesting when we start looking at where we were way back in 2003, 2004, and now we look at where we are now. We constantly see problems, things we have missed, or things that need to be fixed. But what is nice to hear over time is that we are thought of as the leader in accessibility in the federal government. And that comes with willing partners like you guys who are out there able to work with us, talk to us about what the issues are, get educated, get involved. Our job is to try to mitigate risks at the Department of Veterans Affairs to move the ball forward in a partnership way, because we've got a lot of work to do, particularly when it comes to the commercial world, to let them know that what you're doing is helping people access benefits and information and helping them to get access to things like video, multimedia, and that area, and building that stuff up front is important, but also being able to talk to organizations like us at Department of Veterans Affairs is critical so we can help mitigate risks. And that's mostly what we try to do at VA, and communicate the risks through upstairs to our leadership, and work with our people downstream to help them and give them the best tools possible to move forward. I will be happy to take questions at the end. Thank you.
Great, Pat, thank you so much. It was great to hear your sort of insights about not being the 508 police. It's really a commitment and a journey. I know that for many of us, I had initially thought about accessibility in 508 as a binary. And I think to your point, it's a commitment to get better over time. And I love to hear that. So thank you. All right. So with that, let's go ahead and now dive a little bit deeper and bring Lindsay into the conversation. So as Pat was saying, like, successful applications are built with subject matter experts like Lindsay coming in from the 508 office, but also the business and IT, as well as partners. And I think what Lindsay will do is start to bring together the tactical things that you can be doing on a daily basis to make your applications more accessible. So with that, Lindsay, let me turn it over to you.
Thanks, Wade. I'm really happy to be here. I've come from the 508 office. Our mission in the 508 office is really, we audit and we validate. So we really try to equip teams and projects to be their own 508 testers, to implement it from the ground up. And I'm a good case that anyone can learn this. When I came to the 508 office in 2018, I didn't know what 508 was. I thought it was a squadron identifier. I'm from the military, so I said, what's this? Cool, I'm part of the 508 office. But really, from the ground up, it's not that hard to learn. And if we're building it in early on, it's not going to take that much time and effort. It's really going to be simple and easy. So here's some insight into that, and that's just to go into test and train early. I mean, get your training. I started off just Googling it. Go to YouTube. There's videos out there. You can partner with people like UsableNet to get training, but there's so much training out there. LinkedIn has training. It's just amazing, the training out there. And to be able to test it and get in early and build it into your definition of done in your sprints. It's so key, and it saves so much time and money in the end versus going in the end and having to go back and fix everything. And we've seen also a lot of project teams now are building it into their bandwidth. So they'll take 10% of their bandwidth every sprint and focus on just a few 508 defects. So it's just that key to be able to get in there and save a little bit of bandwidth, and we just eat the elephant one bite at a time and getting it done and handling it. We're always going to have defects, like Pat said. We're always going to have issues. It's the nature of software, but the key is to build it in and test it early on and get it identified up front and fix it early. There are three main testing concepts that we use in the VA. The first one I want to talk about is automated testing. And so there's a couple of different mechanisms to use that automated testing. And with that, it really only captures 30% of the issues. So we have background automated testing tools that can analyze your code, and it's an API that plugs right in, and it will dump right into your own reporting tool, your defect reporting tool, 508 defects. So there's really neat tools out there that'll catch bottom baseline issues from the start, and you can roll those into each sprint. And that's what I mean when I say put them in your definition of done. When you lock in that code, it's absolutely key to say, okay, I locked it in. I know that this is 508 compliant from the start. The second method is guided testing. So it's part manual, part automated. And Andy's a good one. It's a plug-in to a browser, and we use color contrast analyzer. It's got a dropper tool that'll drop in. There's some other really unique tools that'll plug into web browsers and also run in the background. And you partially do manual, so you have to click through, Andy. So you'll go next, and it'll list out the different areas. It'll check a table to make sure it has table headers. It will kind of give you the cheat sheet of testing. But the last and I think most important piece of testing is manual testing. Taking your keyboard, unplugging your mouse, and going through the application with your tab key. take a big test case, take a big user story, and just do it without a mouse. And you'll be surprised, oh, I can't get to that area. Oh, I have to use a shortcut key that's not in my user guide to get to that area. Just so many things out there that we don't think about, us mouse users, every day. The hover over on the little eye icon, little things like that that just would surprise you that are not compliant. The second piece is an absolute, is throw a screen reader on it. We use JAWS and NVDA in the VA primarily. NVDA is a free one, so we really have no excuse not to download that screen reader. It's key to testing. You have to try it even with your monitors off. Turn your monitors off, unplug your keyboard, throw that screen reader on, and try to run a big test case. It's as simple as that, and see if you can get to all areas of the screen. And there's a lot of shortcuts with the screen readers out there, so you can download those from the web as well, a simple Google search. And last and most important, it's so important to choose partners and other companies and platforms that embody that agility and usability and really have the effort and the time to put forth to this. Because if we're not all on the same page and one half of the project team embodies it and the other one doesn't, we're not going to get there. So we all have to be in it together, partners, subcontractors, everyone out there has to buy into this, and we'll get there. We can get there together. And I think we have a great case working with Squid on the Waters project, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, where we just really teed up with them, and it was an amazing venture. It still is. We're still ongoing. Like I said, it's never ending. We're always going to be doing new releases and new iterations, and so the testing never stops. And with that, I'll turn it over to Wade to give a setup of the case study that we're talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Lindsay. No, it's been an amazing partnership. I think that back to Pat's point earlier about the 508 place, when Lindsay first got introduced to us, we were thinking, oh no, here we go. It's like a security audit, and we were fearful. And Lindsay and her team just came in and were instructive and guided us and really worked with us on helping improve our capabilities and our sort of acumen when building 508 compliant applications. And so let's talk through this journey, because I think this is a real good example where the rubber meets the road. And so just about this time last year, we started on an effort to replace this business critical application. I saw Chris Colvin's on the line as one of the participants, and he and Hannah Buchan and the VA team that really supports the business had this application, Waters, as a time tracking application that serves 18,000 individuals within the VA, and it's built, as you can see, on top of Salesforce. And so, to Rebecca's question, this application was built on top of Salesforce, and it was built using a third-party grid component, and it had been in place for a while. And I'll ask Lindsay to add some color here, because it was before our time, but there was some real struggles, and it wasn't meeting the needs. So, Lindsay, why don't you just give us a little bit more color around kind of what the situation was before Squid got involved this time last year?
Sure. Kind of ironic you use the word color, because as you can see, for those of us with vision can see the screen, it's a light pink and then a darker red on top. We just had color contrast issues. We had users complaining they couldn't use the application, they couldn't get to the buttons. There's an error message actually covering one of the input fields, and it doesn't meet color contrast requirements. The table wasn't coded as a table. There was just all kinds of issues. And I know I worked with the Waters team quite frequently, and we were working on this over and over. And finally, the team took a jump to Squid, and I think that's when things started to really change. And I'll turn it back over to Wade to go into that.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Lindsay. So this time last year, the VA had used Squid. And so for those of you who don't know, Squid is a low-code application development framework that allows you to build applications within Salesforce or outside of Salesforce, accessing all of your third-party data. And so as a company that embodies usability, human-centered design, and low code, we really had already been used inside the VA in a couple of applications. And the Waters team said, look, this could be our opportunity to rebuild the Waters application, do it quickly, do it under the covers, and deploy it so that the users don't really know that it's a whole new architecture. And I think that was the challenge. And so we got involved and spent about 300 hours of development time end to end. So those of you who've built systems know that 300 hours is the time that it takes most organizations to build the requirements. And I think for us, because of our methodology and what we were able to do partnering with VA, Essential Federal Services, and the 508 office, with 3 hours of development, we were able to totally rebuild the application, 99% without code. There's a little bit of code in there to handle some of the iteration and the complexity in this application. But we weren't allowed to rethink the application. We basically had to rebuild it so that the training manuals didn't have to be changed dramatically. There are unionized employees that had to be considered. And there was a lot of constraints on this. And the team just did an incredible job. And within 6 months, we went live in January. We launched the application. Now, as you all can attest, if you've developed systems, day one of developing an application isn't always the smoothest, right? There's always issues. And I think what really galvanized us together as a team is on day one, 85% of the issues were resolved that day that were reported, and then the rest of them within a day or two afterwards. And so when Lindsay talks about responsiveness, low code is not about getting to day one requirements. It's about every day after that is day one. And so as Lindsay said, we're on a journey together to really continue to make this better and treat every day as day one and be continually improving and getting better. As Pat said earlier, like, we're not at the destination. I don't think we'll ever be at the destination, but we're continuing to strive and push to make this application better. So that was how we were able to get through the development and get to the sort of the finish line of go live. But what we were really impressed by and frankly humbled by was this big quote in the middle, which is, this was a user of Waters. They didn't need the accessible sort of features, but they said, look, this new Waters app feels like $1 million system compared to the previous $100 look. So while we built for accessibility, it made it better for everyone. And so on the right, you'll see, for those that can see, there's a quote here from Hannah Buchan, who was the senior program manager. She and Chris Colvin really led this, and they were just celebrating the launch of this application in the market. And so I think what we collectively were able to deliver inside of Salesforce, using all of the data that's inside of Salesforce, we were able to develop an elegant user experience with more functionality than was there before. It was built declaratively, and declaratively is low code. So can we do that without having to write lines of code? Can we enable people who aren't in IT to be able to keep pace with our business? And then we made it more accessible for all users. And so that, I think, has really had a big impact on the business. Lindsay, is there anything you wanted to add here at the end as we round out this use case?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to comment that it was unbelievable. It was actually refreshing working with Squid, a delight. We had no problem communicating, open lines of communication at all times. And a lot of times I work with project teams who will push me off and won't discuss things with me, and in a couple months, but they made the time. They made the effort, and it was super refreshing just to work with them. They went above and beyond, and it was incredible with their super fast delivery, everything they brought to the table, and just the eagerness and willingness was made my job a lot easier. So thank you for that.
Well, likewise, Lindsay, it was refreshing. Like I said, we were a little afraid when you deployed in, but it was really refreshing. So, all right, with that, and we'll come back to, in the Q&A, some questions about this as well. But let's round up with some of the takeaways from today, and then we have some good time here for Q&A. So I think one of the first ones we heard from Jason is a reminder that access to the internet is now a human right. It's something that across the board, especially in a post-COVID world, we need to be thinking digital first, and we need to be making our applications accessible for all of our constituents. And that accessibility improves the experience for everyone. I think, as Jason was saying earlier, some of the most accessible websites are also some of the best websites, Amazon, Airbnb, all of these applications that we use on a daily basis. The reason we're drawn to them is because they're super usable, and we understand they have clarity and efficiency, and we can do all the things we need to do regardless of our abilities. And as Pat was saying, leaders must advocate for all users. This isn't something that you should just do because of law. This isn't something, this is good for your business. This is good for your employees. One of the members of our team, he had an uncle who lost his sight. The company implemented a new system that was not accessible, and he was forced into retirement because he couldn't use the application to do his job. And that's just not good enough for all of us. And we need to make sure that our leaders are advocating for all users. As Lindsay was saying, design with accessibility from the start. It's too difficult to try to do this as a bolt-on afterwards. There's never going to be time. The demands of the business are going to be relentless. You're going to have day one requirements every single day. And so design it in, go on this journey, make it a little better in every sprint, and you'll start to get to a much, much better product. As Lindsay was saying, she gave you some great guidance on using automated, guided, and manual testing. I don't know about you, but the thought of unplugging my monitor scared me, right? It's a scary thought to go without that. I know that when I use a form, I'll tab through a form. And if a form jumps around, it's really frustrating. And these are things that we just need to think about and we need to test for. And there's great tooling out there. UsableNet's got great tooling. There's great tooling that Lindsay was mentioning, but the technology is out there to help you and to guide you in this path. And then, as we talked about here at the end, make sure you choose partners, whoever they are, that just embody usability and responsiveness. And that's sometimes difficult to find. But if you ask the right questions and you dig in and you see what the user community says, you'll find people that are passionate about certain partners, whether they're system integrators, whether they're technology vendors. Those are the ones you want to go to because they will be a true partner with you on this journey and not just a vendor. And you want to make sure that you pick appropriately. And I think the last thing I'll leave you with as a takeaway is that low code and human-centric tooling enables these amazing accessible applications. It gives you that agility to be able to build and iterate and keep pace. As you can imagine, when COVID hit, I mean, some of our customers were building PPP applications in a day and deploying it because that's what the business needed to be able to serve the community. And so the technology is where it needs to be. And there's no need to go custom code all this stuff anymore. Custom code is great for the really complicated things, but it's just not what will keep pace with the business anymore. So with that, let me end there. So that's the end of the formal part here. Let's go to some questions. And I wanted to start with Rebecca's question, which was, I'll repeat it back out here. So, and Rebecca, thanks for asking that. But she says, we have a new application built on the Salesforce platform. Can we know that because it is built on Salesforce, it will be 508 compliant, or does that depend on the developers of the application? Lindsay, let me ask you to chime in on that one, please.
Yeah, that's a great question. We oftentimes see both sides. So I know at the VA, we have a standard, it's called the default Salesforce template. So majority of the time, if you're using that Salesforce template, using what they're giving you, calling the elements what they are supposed to be called in Salesforce, I know most of the teams have had luck in being compliant or very, very close to compliant. It's when a lot of times the teams get in and do that specialized coding that they're really going to go in and need to do more and more in-depth testing and more validation and verification that what they did in the code underneath the standard Salesforce template is they're not breaking things or mislabeling things.
And to add to that, Lindsay, I would like to congratulate Salesforce on having their own accessibility team. That is so critical for the individuals who are listening here, that you have your own accessibility team. So you're building accessibility in right at the outset. And so when we're adding more to it, other functionality to a product, we don't have to start back from scratch. And so our job within the department is to manage accessibility, to measure accessibility and report it out. So what we'd like to be able to see is our teams, projects, your companies that have already done this kind of work. And so we can just add on to it or refine it, whatever. So having an accessibility team on board that can do the initial work is absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely, Pat. Thank you. So another question that came in here is, my product is already released and in use. Where do I start to ensure that it is accessible? Lindsay, you want to start that one? And then I think, Jason, I'll pull you into the last part of that one. So Lindsay, you want to take a first whack at that?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's key and to partner with a third party. I mean, if you're already released, you're already in the market, and you don't have any internal knowledge or grassroots knowledge in your organization, I think the best advice I could give is partner with somebody. And then eventually I would think that the internal organization could glean some of those aspects of the training and get ramped up and learn from companies like UsableNet to be able to create their own content in the future. But I would definitely recommend partnering with someone if you're just starting to dabble into it. That would be my prime recommendation.
And then Jason, what about you? Any other thoughts that you have?
Yeah, I just really pulling off what Lindsay said before about, you've got to start. So if you haven't done anything, we would typically recommend two things. We would typically recommend taking your top user journeys and testing those against what Lindsay talked about in terms of automated detectable issues. That's going to give you a sort of a litmus test of like, whereabouts are we on accessibility? And the second thing that we always encourage is find a couple of people from the disability community and ask them to complete your user tasks, whether that's a blind user. And that will give you a couple of really important things. If they can achieve it, that's going to give you a lot of confidence that you've got a pretty accessible product. If they can't achieve it, it's going to give you, documentation that's probably going to help you go get resources to solve that, because it's actually a very human thing as opposed to a very sort of technical thing.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Jason. Question, Lindsay, I think for you to start with, but there's a question here about repeating the screen reader tools that you mentioned. And then I think as a follow-on, let's just answer that one first. Can you repeat some of the screen reader tools that you recommended, please?
Sure. Yeah, we at the VA, we use JAWS and NVDA, and I can paste those links in the chat in a second here and give you good information on that. Some of the other tools, I think that was the other part of the question. I can also go over those. I know, Jason, you guys have tools as well. I can grab some links and paste them in the chat though.
Yeah, and I think that what we'll do is after this, we'll send out some of these resources to you. So those of you that may not be able to access the chat, that we can also send those to you afterwards as well. So yeah. So
the only thing I'd add there, Wade, is on the two screen readers. If you're on Windows, we'd recommend NVDA to start with because it's free from Microsoft, as opposed to JAWS, which you have to pay for. So if you're starting out, that's a great sort of screen reader to start with. If you're testing on Mac, you can use Mac's VoiceOver. You don't really need a screen reader. Macintosh has a screen reader built in, so you can instantly start to experience screen readers if you're Mac users of iPhone or a desktop by turning on VoiceOver and using a VoiceOver command as your sort of feedback mechanism.
That's great. Thank you, Jason. Question here is, and this one, Pat, may be best for you, which is, how can I best implement something like this at scale at my company? Pat, would you first weigh in on that one, please?
Sure, be happy to. I think first, being able to define what your problem, how big is your problem that you want to solve. I think you want to start small. You absolutely, if you don't have the expertise in-house, I think getting third party, as Lindsay said, and Jason has said, is critical. Being able to start small, work on either some applications, websites, or whatever, and then being able to understand and report out what the issues are, what is your data telling you, and when you're communicating upstairs to leadership, what are your metrics saying? What is the risk? And that is what leadership wants to know. What is the risk and how can I mitigate that risk? Being able to just not throw data and metrics at them, but understanding when you are reporting this to them, how it can be fixed and what you can put in place so that you don't repeat those issues. So you don't want to just throw problems at leadership, but solutions and what it's going to require to take those solutions, and then being able to show that you can keep this up over time. It's a journey, and we've started that way. There is an awful lot of great expertise out there in commercial companies that do this work. So there are a lot of people to choose from. There is very good training, and there is also certification. So that's why I'm inviting folks on this call. If you want to talk about accessibility, how to get there, and then how to talk about it, reporting and what it looks like and how it's effective, I'm sure happy to talk to folks after this call.
Great. Pat, that's really great. Sorry, there's a bit of feedback there. How would people reach out to you if they want to do that? Is it best to reach out through LinkedIn, or should we just make your email available afterwards?
Yeah, make my email available afterwards. That's fine. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And then for those of you that can see the chat, Lindsay's pasted a number of resources in there. Like I said, those resources we will put in a follow-up email as well to you. So with that, I think we've addressed the questions that have come in. If there's any other questions, we can take one more before we wrap. If not, then what we'll do is we'll go ahead and wrap here and say just thank you. Thank you all for joining. Thanks for your questions. Hopefully this was really valuable. I know that it was really good for us to be able to work with the VA and UsableNet to help put this on for you. Hopefully we hit the mark on delivering a accessible webinar as well. So we tried hard with closed captioning and made sure that the presentation worked with a screen reader. So hopefully we hit the mark. If we didn't hit the mark, please let us know that too, because we do want to get better and make sure that we are able to communicate effectively with all of you. So with that, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Squid, UsableNet VA. Like I said, we'll share our contact details, and have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye.